I recently saw a YouTube short from Totally Not Mark that was called Power Levels Are BS Actually, and since I made a short of a similar title but comes to a different conclusion, I thought it'd be fun to watch through his short and see what points of his I disagree with and explain why I disagree with them so you guys could come to your own conclusions at the end of who you agree with more. This is all for fun, by the way. I like Mark a lot, so no hostility either way. Don't take this too seriously. It's Dragon Ball. Also, if it wasn't clear, I'm watching his short so that way you guys get his full POV. I don't want to misconstrue any of his points so they make my points look better or anything, even if I'm doing it accidentally. But definitely go watch it on Totally Not Mark's channel or watch his other videos at the very least. And you should subscribe to him if you like Dragon Ball and general anime and manga content. All right, let's get into this.
What's an anime hot take you have that people won't like?
Ooh, this one's gonna rub some folks the wrong way, but fuck it, I'm coming for blood. Those Goku solos arguments and those really annoying power level arguments, they're all bullshit and miss the entire point of Dragon Ball's story.
Okay, so Goku solos, I agree. Power level arguments is where I guess we're getting into the actual meat of the video. But I will say Goku solos arguments are really funny to me, generally speaking, because Goku doesn't even solo his own verse, right? He's not even top 10.
Let me explain. The point of introducing power levels into Dragon Ball back during the beginning of Z was to show that power levels were an inaccurate and practically useless metric of measuring someone's combat ability and determining who would win a fight.
That is not true. This is a very fine conclusion to come to while just reading the manga. You do nothing else. But Toriyama in interviews has expressed why he introduced power levels into the series, and it's the exact opposite reason of this. Let me read some quotes to you that I'll flash on screen right now. I thought that if strength and enemy position were both shown through numbers, then it would be easy to understand for both the enemy characters and the readers. Let's look at another one. Why did you come up with the Scouter item? My number one goal in coming up with it was because if an opponent's strength could be seen as a number, it would be very easy for the readers to understand when I put it in the comic. However, I could foresee that it'd be an inconvenience for me down the line, because if you knew a concrete number, then you could tell who would win or lose. So with regards to Goku and Co., I decided that their power would change due to ki and couldn't be adequately measured. In addition, it's a very convenient item to create peril, since with enemies equipped with them, their location could be known and they could be reported. Notably, both of these say that the Scouter is actually very accurate, to the point that Toriyama had to come up with a way for characters to hide their power levels. And notably here, in the story itself, characters can't exceed their power level. They still have a cap. They can just hide it. This is most commonly shown throughout the Namek arc, but during the time of Raditz, power levels were still in their infancy phase, so you can see on the screen here, it's Raditz looking at power levels like the power level of an attack being charged, the Makanko Seppo, or the Kamehameha was even an attack that Raditz saw the power level spike when used. This sort of concept kind of died as the series went on, if you notice. He didn't really go further into the attacks are stronger than the user, more than was explicitly stated. But it is notable because the number is still accurate. You could say that Scouters are inaccurate because they don't accurately measure the full output of someone's power. Sure, that's completely fine. But when a Scouter reads a number, that number is accurate. When Goku's power in that panel on screen right now shot up to 416, he was still weaker than Raditz and couldn't do much of anything. When Piccolo and Gohan have their power levels shoot up because of the Makanko Seppo or Gohan's rage, they can do something because the number is bigger now. Raditz's number was a metric to be overcome. The same with things like Frieza in the Namek Saga, and that's what happens throughout the whole thing. Vegeta's power level was 24,000 now? Great, now he can beat the guy who's 18,000. Power levels are not intrinsically unreliable as a metric. They are unreliable in the circumstance that someone gets caught off guard because they don't realize a person can adjust their power level, which is uncommon in the universe apparently, despite Vegeta and Frieza kinda doing it. Let's keep watching though.
In other words, the point of the mechanic itself was to disprove the effectiveness of that mechanic through characters like Goku, Gohan, fucking Krillin, and even Vegeta exceeding the parameters of the Scouter.
I disagree with that. The point of the mechanic was to disprove the effectiveness of the mechanic. But again, power levels and Scouters and the people who use them are separate things, right? So The thing that wasn't effective was the characters using the scouters and how they were using them, often overlooking that a power level could change because it's a rare thing. Then there's the scouter itself, which fails to show you the maximum output of a character. Instead, it actually tells you what they currently are. Scouters are basically a thermometer. They tell you how hot it is right now. They don't tell you how hot it is tomorrow. And that's what a scouter does. And because people in the Frieza Force read a scouter, or read the thermometer in this analogy, and think that's the temperature it's going to be forever, they are wrong. But that's not the power level being wrong. That's not the power level being bullshit. The final number that a character can reach, the absolute peak, is the hottest it can get outside, let's say. And sure, they can go lower than that, but they have a cap. They have a cap of how hot it can be in their temperature analogy, I guess. I don't know why I'm sticking to this so much. Just generally speaking, the number is accurate at the time it is taken. The issue with the number is that the character that is measuring the number might not believe that number could change, even though it could get to a higher maximum. But again, the maximum doesn't change, which is really important because that means the numbers are right. If bigger number beats smaller number still, even if the numbers can change because someone is suppressing themselves, it is working as is. So I struggle to say anything other than scouters are inaccurate if you solely rely on the first number they give. I agree with that position. But I find it hard to say that power levels as a whole are bullshit. Goku wins on Namek because he has the bigger power level. Goku's Kaioken works because it multiplies his power level. Super Saiyan forms multiply power level. The number itself, kind of irrelevant, I can see that at least, but the number is an arbitrary thing Toriyama threw in because, as I showed in the interviews earlier, he wanted it to be simpler for the readers. He thought it would make things easier to follow. And if anything, Toriyama has it that power levels are too accurate, to the point that he needed to make a system where power level could be hidden to create suspense. And then eventually he drops them. But I would say that he dropped them not because of inaccuracy. But let's keep watching.
That's point number one. Okay, point number one. Point number two, Dragon Ball's built upon a narrative foundation, not a realistic one. Now, what does that mean?
I agree with this. Ultimately, Dragon Ball is a story and needs to be told as a story first and foremost.
Well, if you believe that Goku defeats anyone, that means you're looking at things through a
Once again, I do not.
Logical, real-world lens, while the rest of us, including those writing the story, have always been looking at it first and foremost from a narrative perspective. Meaning that this is a story, first and foremost, where anyone can, in theory, defeat anybody if it's delivered in an interesting way.
Sure.
However, if the writers of the series were to treat each encounter like a real-world fight, the entire, and I do mean this, entire story would look very different, probably be a lot more boring, and would rob the creative inventiveness Dragon Ball has become famous for around the world.
So the thing about the Ten Shinhan point, I guess, is that we were past the point of having numbers. But Ten Shinhan doesn't defeat Cell. Ten Shinhan specifically uses an attack that costs his own life and is stronger because of it to hold Cell back for a very limited amount of time. You could say this is an impressive feat for Ten Shinhan, but it literally would have killed him if Goku didn't take him back. If anything, I think it shows what's more important than power levels or anything else in a series. I think it shows that suspension of disbelief is intrinsically tied to power scaling. In a series like Dragon Ball, if you can't believe that a person can win a fight or can hold someone off for a little bit, you will fall out of the narrative. You will fall out of the escapism of reading a story, of watching an anime, or whatever. You need that suspension of disbelief, and that's intrinsically tied to the inherent power scaling that is built within the series. Not what power scalers do outside of the series for, Discord debates where they measure pixels and calc speeds in real physics formulas. No, you just actually have power scaling within the series that is established so that way you can follow the flow of things and understand who should win, who should not, and why it feels earned or not earned or justified. And if it does feel earned and justified and correct, it's going to be a better story. Power scaling intrinsically is tied to suspension of disbelief in a battle shonen. I think there's no arguing that. And I think he probably would agree.
I mean, Takeo Koyama, the guy who practically wrote every old Dragon Ball movie and special, literally spoke about this very phenomenon amongst Western audiences as they continued to hound him over and over again on Twitter about who is stronger than who. Who fucking cares? It doesn't matter.
I think who fucking cares is a bit extreme there. I think you can just have fun with the series in a different way. And be able to talk to a creative with some sort of authority over the series does feel nice to have some sort of answers to questions. It's the same reason people would ask Toriyama questions in old interviews. I think it's not that far-fetched to believe that there's some people who just enjoy that stuff and want to know. They're just interested. Who do you think would win? It's a battle shonen at the end of the day, so the battling and who wins and who loses is kind of like one of the main appeals. It's not the only appeal of Dragon Ball, as some people might falsely say, but it is one of the main ones. There's no denying that.
Also, because I know there'll be so many fucking annoying people talking about this in the comments later,
Oh, that's me. I'm cooked.
scaling as an idea is important in a story like Dragon Ball, because it controls so much of the structure and the tension, okay? Now,
Correct. He agrees. Okay, yeah, he understands that the power scaling in the series is from suspension of disbelief. At the end of the day, it's intrinsically tied to the tension and narrative of the story. Yeah, I mean, me and Mark are on the same page about a lot of stuff. We disagree on some stuff in the series for sure, but we're on the same page about a lot of this, more narrative-focused stuff, I would say.
And I am not the fun police. I can totally understand the desire to have fun discussions of what-if scenarios with friends online. Heck, I've been guilty of that very pleasure in the past. But I think some folks take it way too seriously, dedicate their time to actually bully people online for their opinions, and ruin the atmosphere in this very community that we all love. And that's when I think it stops being harmless fun and becomes just straight up destructive idiocy. In other words,
Power levels are bullshit.
That's the short. Like I said throughout, I think power levels aren't inherently bullshit. The number, when it reads the number, is the number. It's not like you could watch the Saiyan Saga and see a power level of 400 just punch somebody who's a power level of 13,000 and they win because the power level was actually inaccurate. The power level was accurate of the time. Raditz's Scouter was updating in real time to accommodate for the changing power levels on the battlefield. Vegeta's Scouter putting Goku's power level at over 8,000 wasn't inaccurate. That was the number he had. That was them seeing that Goku could hide his power level down to 5,000 and shoot it up to 8,000. This is just how things work. These numbers are accurate. The person with the bigger number wins the fight. That is how Dragon Ball works. And if anything, like Toriyama said, power levels are potentially so accurate that you have to find convoluted ways to make suspense and tension appear in your series. Like having someone show up with a power level of 5 for the 18th time, only to show that they have a power level of 3 billion. That's just not fun. The real reason power levels disappeared is because the Frieza Force had the technology that measured power levels. Sure, you could say Jiro would have just made it if Toriyama wanted to keep the concept, but if Toriyama didn't want to keep the concept, why'd he bring it back temporarily in the Buu Saga in Babidi's ship? I think Toriyama saw that the power levels say too much, are hard to make suspenseful and have tension in the narrative, and even when you do successfully do that, you have to find a new way to do it every single time, which eventually becomes not only stale, but hard to do. So he dropped the concept. I don't think power levels themselves, the number, are bullshit, because the number has always been accurate. The number, at the end of the day, was bigger number beats smaller number. And I don't think there's any evidence to the contrary. At least not in the short, and at least not that I've really seen. But maybe you have something in mind. Let me know in the comments below. Maybe you still agree with Mark more than me. That's fine. See you around.